Hey everyone, welcome to Sidetrack Adventures. This is Steve. Right now we're at a rest area on Interstate 15 in California, not too far from the Nevada border. But before it was Interstate 15, it was Highway 91 that led travelers through the desert here between Southern California and Nevada. And small towns, many with nothing more than a garage and a diner, would have been like oases to those early travelers. But with the coming of the interstate and better cars, many of those oases were abandoned and forgotten. Well, today we're going to head a few miles south of here to a couple of those forgotten places, one of which will look very familiar to anyone who's traveled between Southern California and Las Vegas, and we'll explore them and their history. This is the Valley Wells rest area, and as far as rest areas go, it's pretty cool. There are a number of informational signs, but what I really like are the historic sign replicas here, highlighting some of the highway history of the area. The road through this area was originally built in the early 1920s as the Silver Lake cutoff for the Arrowhead Highway. In 1926, it became US Route 91. Then Route 91 was decommissioned in 1974, when this became Interstate 15. This cracks me up. Here's a sign for Clark Mountain, and it's placed in a way that makes it look like that mound in front of us is Clark Mountain. But Clark Mountain is actually over here. Clark Mountain is the highest mountain in the Mojave Desert, with an elevation of 7,933 feet. Because of the high elevation, it occasionally snows near the peaks. It's also one of the only places in the Mojave Desert where you can find pine trees. But enough about mountains and modern rest stops. It's time to hit the road. Our first stop is about 5 miles from here. Officially named Yucca Grove, it's probably best known today as Halloran Summit. Here is the abandoned Hilltop Service Station, where most of what remains of Halloran Summit, or Yucca Grove, can be found. The sign has definitely taken a beating, but it's still holding on. There's some housing at the back of the property, which is a far cry from the motor cabins we'd have seen had we come here in the 1940s. Most mentions of this place in the newspapers of the 1920s through the 1940s or 50s called it Yucca Grove, but in the 1960s it started being referred to as Halloran Summit. I'm not sure why the name changed, but the exit to get here from the interstate is Halloran Summit Road. I guess we could head inside and take a little bit of a closer look at the garage. While there were facilities here for travelers on the road dating back to the 1920s, the reason there was ever a town here was because of gold mining in the area. Now, this station does have a bit of a dark history. In 1976, in a story that seems like it's straight out of the movie Natural Born Killers, a couple stopped here on their way to Las Vegas to get married. I guess they needed some extra cash because they murdered the attendant and robbed the place. They were later arrested in Las Vegas, but did manage to get married first. Holy smokes, that just scared the heck out of me. What timing for that metal to bang the wall. It looks like we're behind the restrooms now. That banging metal in there is a little bit unnerving, so I'm going to walk around the outside to check this place out. It's been a long time since this place has had chips, soda, or even juice. I think this place closed down in the early 2000s. This place is for sale if anyone's interested, though I imagine it'll cost more to clean up the mess than this land is worth. There's a great view of Clark Mountain off in the distance. But let's take a little bit of a look around the gas station. Doesn't look like much is left of it. Anything of value has probably long since been stripped. Somehow this one still has part of its hose. And this one's been knocked over. I imagine, had you needed to use this garage back when it was open, you were probably having a pretty bad day. These are actually open. Let's take a look inside. Not much. This is where the market would have been, and that metal is still banging away in there. Made me jump again. I'm at the back of the lot now where that housing was, and I'm just trying to make sure nobody's camped out in there before we get too close. I don't think anyone's here, so I'm gonna take a look inside, and hopefully we don't regret this. I don't know when these were last occupied, but it was recent enough that they have a satellite dish. Right down this road, just to the east of the gas station, is the Mojave National Preserve. But we're going to head to the west side of the freeway, to the old part of Yucca Grove. This blue, heavily graffitied building here is what's left of the Yucca Grove Cafe. This place opened in 1928, and it had a cactus garden in the 1930s that was said to be one of the finest attractions in the desert between Victorville and Las Vegas. The alien beef jerky place hadn't opened yet. I'm not sure when this place closed down, but in 1938 there was a pretty crazy event that happened here. The owner of the cafe was inspecting the kitchen and he came across a rat. So what do you do when you see a rat? Well, of course you pull out your gun and you shoot it. Well, he did manage to kill the rat, but unfortunately the bullet went through the wall and also killed one of the dishwashers. Because they ruled the shooting an accident, the owner was never charged with any crime. Here's the fireplace. The reason this building is blue is years ago someone came in and painted it blue to try to cover up all the graffiti, and you could see how that worked out. Like I said, I'm not sure when this place closed down, but I wouldn't be surprised if one day the owner just retired. This is a pretty good view of Clark Mountain through the cafe window, but now we're going to head downhill to our next forgotten spot along the freeway. A place that will probably look pretty familiar to anyone who has driven between Las Vegas and Southern California. We are now at Halloran Springs, and I feel like this is a pretty iconic sign along the freeway, one that has been here for decades. We're also right on the boundary of Mojave National Preserve, but I'm not exactly sure if the gas station and cafe are in the park or not. Halloran Springs is much older than the highway, and I'll kind of talk about its history as we walk over to the cafe. There's long been mining in the area, but more importantly, there was water. The springs that Halloran Springs were named for was at an intersection for a number of old roads and wagon routes. The springs are actually a little bit to the west of here. When the auto road that became Highway 91 and later Interstate 15 was built, things kind of shifted towards the road, And in the 1920s, a man named W.E. Gilmore opened a service station here. You might be wondering who Halloran Springs is named after. No one seems to know for sure anymore. There's a book on California place names that says it was named after a settler in the early 1900s, but apparently it was being called Halloran Springs as far back as the 1870s. And this is the inside of the cafe, or what's left of it anyways. And it looks like there's a mattress over there, so I'm going to exit the cafe. I don't think anyone is in here, but it's better to be safe than sorry. When I see a bed set up, I'm not going near it. Looks like here's where the bathrooms were. And here's the service station, which is not a place you wanted to need, and I'll get into why in just a minute. Taking a look back at the cafe, they don't make signs like this anymore. You knew what you were getting when you went to this cafe. So in the 1970s, the owner of this service station got into legal trouble for scamming people. They would do things like say cars that have simply overheated, had serious engine trouble, and charge for major repairs, or tow cars all the way to Las Vegas, which is 81 miles away, instead of Baker. You can actually see Baker from here. They'd also tell people who had AAA that it wasn't valid out here, and they changed competitors' billboards to list their phone number instead. After the owners got busted and new owners took over the service station, you'd think the new owners would have learned a lesson from the previous owners. Well, I guess they did, but it was the wrong lesson, because in the 1980s, they got busted for the same things. This place looks to be in pretty bad shape, but let's take a look inside. I believe this station closed for good in 1998. They actually remodeled the gas station in the early 1990s, but obviously it didn't help much. It didn't even last a decade after the remodel. But really, it's a pretty bad location. Baker's just right down the hill, and why stop here when you can stop in Baker where there's so many more options? One of the additional revenue sources for this place was offering mine tours, so it also didn't help that the mining operations in this area aren't what they once were. What's left of one of the houses is over here, as well as a Santa Fe railroad car, so we can go check that out. Getting back to the name for this place real quick, there is some speculation that it was named for an army officer at Camp Katy, which was about 50 miles southwest of here in the 1860s. It sounds plausible, but who knows? I mean, someone could have named it for their dog for all we know. If nothing else, this mobile home had a pretty sturdy roof. This Santa Fe railroad car was used as kind of a billboard. They would put signs on the side of it to advertise to people on the interstate. Here's what's left of a truck and where someone used to live. There is just junk everywhere around here. Not only was Halloran Springs a stop, good or bad, for early auto travelers, it's been servicing travelers much longer than that, well over 1,000 years. And we can see evidence of those earlier travelers right on the other side of the freeway. Millions of people drive by here every year, but very few know what's hidden right off the freeway. Long before the garages or cafes, this was an important stop for ancient travelers through the Mojave, and evidence of those earlier travelers is still here. It looks like there might be a symbol on this rock, but it's kind of hard to tell. but I do know where some better, more obvious petroglyphs are, so let's head over there. Those symbols in front of us are modern. It looks like, unfortunately, someone vandalized this rock. But if we look right next to it, we'll find something far more ancient. At the time of European contact, the Mojave lived in this area, and they likely created the more prominent art we see. But some of the stuff out here predates them, going back 1,000 years or more. There are petroglyphs all throughout this ridge. And just to get an idea of how close to Interstate 15 we are, here it is right here. There's one more place I want to check out while we're out here, and that's a bit further west. We are now near the actual spring where Halloran Springs gets its name, and this is said to be the site of the first store and gas station out here, before what became Highway 91 was built. We're about 1.5 miles from the interstate now, and check out this view from here. There was a lot of mining in the area, and most of their business would have been selling to miners, because not many other people would have been coming through here yet. There's not a lot left, but like most abandoned places in the desert, there are still a lot of cans laying around. But this is what's left of the first roadside establishment in Halloran Springs, which was probably a very welcome sight to those early travelers. From here, Halloran Springs Road continues on into the Mojave Desert, where you can find a number of turquoise mines, some modern and some ancient, dating back well over 1,000 years. But this is where we're gonna stop today, so thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and we'll see you next week.